Because remember, the balance line is there because we have to, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. It reminds us we have to hop over the balance line. So yesterday there were 2 things to do. That's why it was called 2-step. 2 things to do. Today, we're going to have more than 2 things to do. And because there's more than 2 things to do, that's why it's called multi-step. Okay? That's why it's called multi-step. All right. So before we get started with anything that has a number on the outside, we have to go distribute. What does that word distribute mean? Oops, I don't want to be on the line. I want to be on this one. What is distribute a fancy word for? What math operation is distribute? What math operation is distribute? Now make sure you're following along because we will not have time at the end of the period. It's a shorter day on Wednesdays. We know this. So what math operation is distribute? Yes, it's multiplication. And we have to show that multiplication. We're not just doing it. Okay, we have to show it. So I am not affecting the left side. I'm not changing that 11 at all. I'm not changing the 11 at all. I'm going to go do this distribution, this multiplication of the 6 times each number in times each thing inside. So it's a positive 6 times an S and a positive 6 times a negative 11. Okay, I'm showing that I'm distributing. Okay, again, the 11's not been changed. A number times a letter, just squish them together. And then we have to do 6 times negative 11. Six times negative 11, what would we get? What would 6 times negative 11 get us? Negative 66, exactly. Okay, so now we've handled the distribution. We're going to go do our big zeros and our big ones. We use big zeros to get rid of addition and subtraction. We get rid of big ones. We do use big ones to get rid of multiplication and division. Okay, we use big zeros to get rid of addition and subtraction. We use big ones to get rid of multiplication and division. So the first thing I have to handle is this negative 66. That's addition and subtraction. So am I going to use big 0 or big 1 to get rid of addition and subtraction? What did we just say? I need that negative 66 to zero out. I need to big 0. Addition and subtraction is the big 0. Multiplication and division are the big 1. Okay? Okay, so I need to zero out a negative 66. How am I going to zero out a negative 66? What am I going to do? Add 66 to it. Exactly. But whatever we do to one side, we have to do together. So yes, we have to add 66 to both sides. Remember, whatever we do on one side, we have to do on the other. Okay, so I'm going to add 66 to the left side. And I'm going to show add 66. And I'm going to add 66 to the right side so that it zeroes out, big zeros, that negative 66. That is now 0. We do not care about it. It's gone. Because when we add 0 to stuff, it doesn't change anything, right? That's the whole idea of the big 0, that adding 0 changes nothing. All right, so I need to do the math now. What's the left side going to become? $77, exactly. And that 77 is going to equal what was left on the right-hand side. 6s. Okay, and I'm going to take that up because I've run out of space. I'm going to put it up over here so I can continue. All right, so I finished my big 0. The 6 with the s means multiplication. So I have to undo multiply. I have to undo multiply. What did I say we do to undo multiply? We make the big 1. Okay, we're making our big 1 now. We have to big 1 that 6 out of there. So what are we going to do to big 1 that 6 out of there? We're doing the opposite of what multiplication is, because that's what makes a 1. Any number divided by itself is 1. So I need to get that 6 out of there. What would I do? Divide what by 6? Divide what by 6? Both sides by 6, yes. So at this point, because I want the letter to go first, I'm going to swap sides. Doesn't matter, I'm just flipping it over. My 6s is going to divide by 6. Always letters first. And my 77 is going to divide by 6. Just flipped it over. Didn't change anything. Okay, that made the 6 become a 1. 6 divided by 6 is 1. And 1 times numbers changes nothing. So my answer is that S is going to equal 77 over 6. And it's okay. Fractions are valid answers. Fractions are valid answers. Thank you for joining us, Janessa. You are tardy. 2 more minutes and you would have been absent. Class starts at 8:50 on Wednesdays. You know that. Cameras are already on. We're working on the lecture. Okay, so there were multi-steps. There are at least going to be 3 steps on every problem. So let's go look at the next one. I see a number outside, so I need to distribute. Distribute means we are multiplying. We're multiplying the outside times each of the inside pieces, and we are showing that multiplication. We are showing that multiplication. Okay, we are showing the multiplication. So for showing the multiplication, that means I have to write it. The 12 times the n, positive 12 times 11. I don't have to worry about a sign because it's positive 11. Okay. The 6n is still hanging around out there. It didn't go anywhere. Okay. We show the distribution. We show the distribution. Okay, now we have to go do the math though. Okay, we're going to go do the math now. Anytime a number multiplies times a letter, we just write them together. So this says 12n. Now we have to figure out what 12 times 11 is. And it's positive. We know that because it's positive times positive. What's 12 times 11? Okay, 132. And then we have the positive 6n that was already there. And it still equals 7. That was already there. All we did was clean up. After we showed our distribution, we did the cleanup. Okay, so this time I noticed I have two n's on the same side. I have a 12n and I have a positive 6n. I need to deal with that. Before I can get into the big zeros, before I can get into the big ones, I have to do distribution and combine like terms. Okay. So I need to combine those. They are both the same sign. So what do we do when they're both the same sign and we're combining them? What do we do when they're both the same sign and we're combining them? We add them and keep their sign. So if they were both negative, we'd add them together and keep that sign. But these are both positive. So we're going to add them together and keep the sign. What are we going to get? We have a 12n combined with a 6n. We have an 18n. And we have that 132 we already figured out. And we have the equal to 7 that was still there. Now we can start big zeroing and big one. We always do big zeros first. We handle addition and subtraction first. Addition and subtraction first. So we need to big zero what thing? Which one of our numbers has to big zero out of there because there's addition and subtraction for it? Which one of the numbers do we need to big zero out of there? Because it involves addition and subtraction or subtraction. Which one of our three numbers, 18n, 132, or 7, do we need to big zero out of there? The 132. So how are we going to big zero a positive 132? How are we going to big zero this positive 132? Subtract 132 from both sides, exactly. So minus 132 from the left. Whatever we do on the left side, we have to do on the right side. Whatever we do on the left side, we have to do on the right side. So I'm going to just copy and paste it over. Okay. So by doing that, I big zeroed the 132 out of there, right? It's gone. So I can cross it out. It's all gone. That's gone. That's not what I wanted. Gone. Because 0 added to anything doesn't change it. That was the goal. That's what big zero's goal is. Zero added to stuff doesn't change anything. Okay, so now we've got to say what's left. After we do that addition and subtraction line, what's left? What are we still working with? Let's do our math. What's left on the left-hand side? And I'm going to put it over here so I have space. 18n has to equal. What's left on the right-hand side? Do the math. Are those the same sign? Positive 7 with negative 132? Are those the same sign? Positive 7 subtracting 132? No. So when they're not the same sign, what math do we do? When they're not the same sign, what math do we do? And then what? After we subtract, what do we do? It's not just subtract, it's subtract and keep the sign that's on the bigger one. So are we going to be positive or are we going to be negative? If we're subtracting and keeping the sign that's on the bigger one, it's going to be negative. Okay, it's going to be negative. Negative what? Didn't want to do that. Negative what? So 132 minus 7 is what we're thinking about. 132 minus 7. A negative 125. Oops, where's my one? Okay, so I have gone ahead and I have done my big zero. I've gotten rid of that negative 132, that 132, right? I've gotten rid of the 132. So I now have to do what? What's left? I have division left. I have multiplication left. So what do we do with division and multiplication? Big zero or big one? When we're multiplying and dividing, are we big zero or are we big one? Big one. So we need to undo the multiplying times 18. This multiply 18, I have to fix something. I got to figure out how to fix that back because it's not letting me do what I want it to do. Technology, love hate. I'm backing up to see if I can undo what I did. Give me a second. I want to rewrite it. It's like, So I had 18n that equaled negative 125. That's how we figured this out. Okay. And I have to undo this multiply times 18. I have to undo that multiply times 18. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to undo multiply times 18 so it becomes the number 1? Because anything divided by itself is 1. How are we going to undo that multiply times 18? How are we going to undo that multiply by 18? Let me put this here too, so we don't wonder where it came from. How are we undoing multiplying times 18? Come on, guys. How do you undo multiply times 18? We have to get rid of that multiply 18. What are we going to do? What's the opposite of multiplying times 18, guys? Divide both sides by 18. Thank you. So 18n divides by 18. And the 125 divides by 18. Negative 125, sorry, divided by 18. Now, can 18 simplify 125? No. So we are done. We just have to write our answer and circle it. We have big 1'd out this 18. And the final answer is just going to say n equals negative 125 divided by 18. Now, if 18 had simplified to 125, then you need to do that, okay? You need to go ahead and simplify if you can. But I know it can't because 18 is only made with 9, 2, 6, 3, and none of those go into 125 evenly. We're not finding decimals. We're doing simplified fractions. All right, does this next problem have a distribution in it? Does this problem 2a have a distribution in it that we have to worry about? No. So then we have to worry, does it have combined like terms in it? Does it have more than one of something on the same side? And the answer to that is yes. It has two numbers on this left side. So we have to combine those to a single number. Combine the like terms. So what would they combine to? How would we rewrite the left side simpler? That's why we did that simplifying the other day. How would we rewrite the left side simpler? Combine our like things. Combine our like things. Combine our highlighted stuff. V equals 13. And that's still going to equal the 5v minus 10, though. We're not changing that side at all. Let me fix that. That is supposed to be a positive sign. Okay. We're not changing that 5v minus 10. We're just cleaning up the left side. So we can start big 0 and big 1. Okay, we're going to be doing big 0 because I see addition and subtraction. When I big 0, the first thing I do is letters. So I need to worry about how to move my letters. And when I move my letters, I move the smaller letter to the bigger letter. Now, what number is actually in front of this V? If I just say V, how many are there? What number is there? A 1. So I'm going to write it as a 1V so that I remember it's 1 there. Okay. In our final answers, we don't put the 1, but along the way in our work, we can have it just to remind ourselves. I need to move the smaller letter over to the bigger letter. So who's smaller, 1 or 5? Okay, so I need to big 0, 1V out of there. How would I big 0, 1V out of there? Subtract 1V, not 1, 1V from both sides. From the left side to turn it into the big 0, right? And from the 5, the V on the right side, so we can combine like terms. Oops, line. That's all gone. What's left on the left-hand side then? 13. Okay. Oops, what did I do wrong thing? 13. So 13 has to equal what? Do the math for the right-hand side. What would the right-hand side say? 5v's minus 1v. Yep. 4v minus 10. The minus 10 is still there. Am I done with all of my addition and subtraction? Am I done with all of my addition and subtraction? No. So I'm still doing big zero. Okay, I'm still doing big zero. So I'm looking for addition and subtraction. I see this negative 10. There's my addition and subtraction, right? I need to move that negative 10 out of there by big zeroing it. What are we going to do? Add 10 to both sides. Okay. The 10s are gone. They became 0. The left-hand side now says what? What's the left side say? 23. And that has to equal what's left on the right-hand side? The 4v. Okay, have we handled all of our addition and subtraction? Yes, so now we're going to big 1. We need to big 1 whatever's with the letter. So that 4 needs to big 1 out of there. That 4 needs to big 1 out of there. How are we going to big 1 that 4 out of there? That 4 needs to go. How are we going to big 1 that out of there? Divide both sides by 4, exactly. Now, letters come first. So 4v divided by 4 has to equal 23 divided by 4. Letters come first. Letters are always on the left. Some of you keep not listening to the instructions, and I'm not giving you full credit for work for that. Letters stay left. So sometimes we have to flip it over, and it's okay. It doesn't matter if the number equals the letter or the letter equals the number, the answer is still the same. Okay, so once we big 0 that 4 out of there, what is left on the left-hand side? What is left on the left-hand side? If we big 1 that 4 out of there, what do we have left? If we big 1 that, if we big 1, we have a v left. And then that's going to equal the 23 over 4 because it can't simplify. If it was 24 over 4, would we be done? If it was 24 over 4, would that be good enough? Could I leave it as 24 over 4? Is that a valid answer? No. Could I leave it as a 22 over 4? Is that a valid answer? No. Because 22 and 4 can simplify each other. So you have to make sure your fraction is simplest form. Because 22 and 4 both divide by 2. Okay? So you got to watch out. There will be some you need to simplify. Simplest form. Okay. You tell me, what's my first step for this one? What's my first step for 2b? What's my first step for 2b? Because I see a parentheses. What's our first step when we see a parentheses? No. What's our first step when we see a parentheses? Look at 1a and 1b. Distributive property. So we do our distribution because we see a parentheses. So that says a 10 times a c, positive 10 times positive 5, plus the 6 that was already there, has to equal 3c minus 6. Show your distribution. Show that you're multiplying that 10, the outside number, times each piece. So let's go do our math. Whenever we see a letter next to a number, we just write them squished. So 10c. Now we have to do the math. The 10 times the 5. What do we get? Solve 10 times 5. Remember, you guys' grade is participation. So those of you that are answering nothing, you get nothing. Okay, and then the 6 that was already there has to equal the 3c minus 6 that was already there. We're done doing the distribution. Are we ready for big zeros and big ones? Is it cleaned up? Are we ready for big zeros and big ones? When we have two things of the same kind on the same side? No, we are not ready for big zeros and big ones because we haven't combined our like terms. So you cannot start with big zeros and big ones until you have combined your like terms. Distribution, combine like terms, then big zero, then big one. That's what we learned. So we have to combine our like terms and simplify the left side. What's the left side going to simplify down to once we combine our like terms? What's the left side going to combine down to? 10c plus 56 has to equal the 3c minus the 6. That side's not changed yet. We haven't done anything. Now we are cleaned up. Now we're ready to go. Now we do our addition and subtraction. We handle our big zeros. Which big zeros do we do first? Letters or numbers? Which big zero do we do first? Letters or numbers? Letters. So I'm looking at my 10c and my 3c, and I'm deciding who is smaller because that's the one that's got to move. Who's smaller? Who's smaller? 3c is. What kind of 3c? Is that a positive 3c or a negative 3c? It's a positive 3c. So we need to zero out a positive 3c. How would we zero out a positive 3c? By subtracting 3c from both sides, exactly. Minus 3c on the left side and the right side. Because whatever we do left, we have to do right, which is the purpose of the line. Reminds us we have to jump over. I'll make it do that for a minute. Okay. Now we do the math. That'll work for this, but not for that. Sometimes I can make that circle work 2 ways. That's 0. We go do our math. 10 C's minus 3 C's. What's left? Go do the math. What's the left-hand side going to say? Seven C plus 56? Yes, because 10 minus 3 is not 13. 7C plus 56 has to still be equal to what's left on the right-hand side once we zero out that C part. What's left? -6. Okay. So are all the adds and subtracts done? Have we finished everything adding and subtracting? No, so we have to still big zero. What piece do I need to big zero out of there now? What piece do I need to big zero out of there now? Yes, the positive 56. So how are we going to big zero that positive 56? Yes, by subtracting 56 from both sides of the equal sign. So minus 56 on both sides. Try to do a wrong one. I need this one to be. Minus 56 on both sides. Okay. What is left on the left-hand side? 7C. Exactly, because the 56 is canceled out. I'll move in a second. And that 7C has to be equal to. Now, on the right-hand side, I have 2 numbers. Are they both the same sign, or there's one positive and one negative? Same sign. So when they're the same sign, what do we do math-wise? When they're the same sign, what do? We add them and keep that sign. So what are we going to say 7C is equal to? Add them and keep the sign. -62. Okay, and then I'm going to copy this up here because I've run out of space. All right. Have I handled all of my adding and subtracting now? Yes, so now I'm going to big 1. What's going to big 1? What are we going to big 1 out of there? What are we going to big 1 out of here? What has to go? What do we need to big 1 out of there? And how are we going to big 1 it away? What are you going to big 1 out of there? And how are you going to make it go? What are we big running out of there? And how are we going to make it go? We need to big 1 the 7, not 7C. 7. It's the number with the letter, not the letter 2. Okay, and to get rid of it, we're going to do what? We're big oneing the 7 by doing what? Big oneing the 7 by doing what? How are we going to move that 7 out of there? And it should have the phrase both sides on it, right? So what are we going to be doing to get that 7 out of there? Come on, guys. What do we do to move the 7? That says times 7 right now. We're not doing big 0. We're doing big 1. That says times 7. What are we going to do to move it out of there? Be specific. Yes, thank you. Divide 7 on both sides. 7c has to divide by 7. And the negative 62 has to divide by the 7. Whatever you do on the left, you must do on the right. You have to divide both sides because a number divided by itself is the number 1, which is the big 1. Now, can a negative 62 be simplified by 7 in any way? Can a negative 62 be simplified by a 7 in any way? No. So we just are going to say that it is equal to C equals negative 62 over 7, and we have to leave it like that. But what if it was dividing by 8? Can 62 and 8 simplify each other? A little bit even? Can 62 and 8 simplify each other a little bit? Yes, because 62 is an even number and 8 is an even number, I would be able to simplify by 2. How about if it was like a 49 over 7? How about if it was a 49 over 7? Would I simplify that one? Okay, so just because it's a fraction doesn't mean you leave it that way. You have to make sure you simplify it. Okay, 3A. You tell me, what's my first step? What do you see and what's our first step? Two A, what's going to be our first step based on what we see? Distributive property. Okay, good job. Okay, so I have to do my show the distribution. Okay, the 2 is going with the A and the 2 is going with the 6. And that means multiply. So 2 multiplied by A, positive 2 multiplied by 6. I don't need to say positive 6 because without a sign, we know it's positive, and that has to equal 6 because that was already there. Okay, go do the math. What's it going to simplify to? What's it going to simplify to? What's my left side going to simplify and say? How are we going to rewrite this simpler? Tell me what it would look like once we do that multiplication. That 2a, oops, lost it. My 2a plus 12 has to equal 6 because the 6 was there. They gave it to us. Okay, do we have to clean up anything else? No. So now we're getting going. We're big zeroing and big oneing. Do we see addition and subtraction? Yes, there's an add 12. So we have to big zero that 12 out of there. What are we going to do? Subtract 12 from both sides. Exactly. Thank you. So minus 12 on the left. And we're doing the same thing to the right. Because whatever we do on the left, we have to do on the right also. And we know a positive 12 with a negative 12, that makes a 0. That was the goal, to make the 0. What's left for the left-hand side? What's left for the left-hand side to be? 2a. Has to equal. Now, are the numbers on the right side both the same sign? No. So if they're not both the same sign, because we're combining, what are we going to do math-wise? Tell me the whole process that we do when they're not the same sign. Tell me the whole process we do. When they're not the same sign, we subtract and what? Because it matters. Subtract and what? Keep the sign that's on the bigger. So we're subtracting 12 take away 6. But what's the sign going to be? Okay, so negative what? 12 take away 6. Okay. Have we handled all of the adding and subtracting in the problem? Yes. So now we have to do big 1. We have to move that 2 out of there. What are we going to do to move that 2 out of there? What are we going to do to move that 2 out of there? Because that says multiply by 2. Divide both sides by 2. I'm going to move it up over here though. So 2a has to divide by 2. And it has to equal the negative 6 divided by 2. Because whatever we do on the left side, we have to do on the right side. That big 1's out that 2. Right? All we have left on the left-hand side is what? What's left? What's left? Once the 2 is gone. What stayed behind? A. And that has to equal, do the math for the right-hand side. What's that going to equal? Negative 3, because 6 divided by 2 and a negative sign. So my A equals negative 3. Oh, look, one that worked out. No fraction. Yay. Okay, we're on our last one. What do we do? What's the first step going to be? What's the first step going to be? Distributive property. So I have to show my distribute. And right? And I show the math. That is a positive 3 times an S and a positive 3 times a negative 10. And that has to equal what the other side said. We don't change that yet. Notice I said the word yet. It'll happen, just not yet. We handle one thing at a time. So the right-hand side is a 3s minus 30, and that has to equal the right-hand side that we haven't changed yet, because we do one step at a time. Take your time. We now have to handle this right-hand side because it's got too much. What's the right-hand side going to change up to? What's the right-hand side going to change up to? Do the math. Do the math for the right-hand side. What are we going to get? 24. Oops, write it in one spot. Okay, have we handled distribution and combined like terms? Is that all done? Have we handled our distribution? Have we handled our combined like terms? So we're as simple as we can be. So what are we going to do now? Are we big zeroing or are we big oneing? Zero, because I see an addition and subtraction. We always big zero first. So how am I going to handle that negative 30? What am I going to do? I have to big zero out that negative 30. So we're going to add 30 to both sides. Yes. Because whatever we do on the left, we have to do on the right. So we have to do both sides. Okay, so we big zeroed out that 30. It's all gone. What's left on the left-hand side then? What do we have left over there if we big zeroed the 30 away? 3s. And it has to equal the right-hand side. Are they both the same sign or are they different signs? They're the same sign. So do the math. What would they be? $54. Exactly. Okay, so have we handled all the addition and subtraction? Yes. So now we're going to do what? We've handled all the addition and subtraction. We move on to what? Big zero or big one? We've handled all the addition and subtraction. We're working on the big one and we're looking at what's with the letter and we're making it go away by doing the opposite. So that right now says 3 times S. So how are we going to handle that 3 times the S? How are we going to handle that 3 times the S? What are we going to do? We're going to divide 3 on both sides. Exactly. We're going to get rid of it by doing the opposite of multiply, divide. So my 3s is going to divide by the 3. The number that's with the letter is always what we're dividing by. And that has to equal my 54 divided by my 3. Okay? That big one's out. That all that's left on the left-hand side is what now? All that's left on the left-hand side is what now? The s. And the s has to equal, do the math for the right-hand side. It's okay to use a calculator. 18. All right. All right. Oops, where did I do the wrong thing? I want the circle. Turn it in. Turn in your work.